You are listening to the Nature's Premier Podcast, episode 23. Here on the Nature's Premier Podcast, we talk about everything from bees to babies and sustainable living. Join us while we talk about natural parenting and different ways to live a more sustainable lifestyle for ourselves and our future generations to come. Now let's begin. Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Nature's Premier Podcast. I am your host, Brooke Nichols, founder of Nature's Premier Diaper Service, located here on Long Island, New York, and I am so excited and very grateful, as always, to be here with you all today. So today we're going to chat about natural parenting. Yes, the very broad topic with 1,000 subcategories we are going to be chatting a little bit about today. Now, before you shut this off and you wait till next week's new episode, listen a little bit to this episode. We are going to be chatting with someone who's very knowledgeable about the topic, and you will be pleasantly surprised to learn a little bit more about natural parenting that you might not have learned before. Now, natural parenting has a lot of categories. There's a million different things I could rattle off, but we all know kind of the basics, which is like cloth diapering, breastfeeding, co-sleeping. I mean, there's a lot of different types of, quote unquote natural parenting type of models that you can practice. But what a lot of people don't talk about that really should be talked about more frequently is the inclusion of maybe more conventional minded type of families into the natural parenting movement. Now, when I was younger and my daughter was a baby, my oldest daughter, she's 10 now, but I was very intimidated by the natural parenting movement. I felt like I had to walk a really tight line, and I felt like, I couldn't bend to certain things, and I definitely didn't feel as included as I do now. So what a lot of people have to realize, especially new parents, is that you can adopt any part of natural parenting into your lifestyle. You do not need to be, cloth diapering for, 10 years or be a level 5,000 baby wearer. I mean, because I know for me, I just rock Tulas all day. I never did the wraps and stuff. And that was something that was intimidating to me. And I was like, oh, if I don't know all this, I'm not going to be, a natural minded mama, whatever. I mean, it's so silly, the restrictions we put on ourselves when you think about it in retrospect. But natural parenting is something that anyone can adopt. Even if you think you're on the complete other opposite end of the spectrum, you can certainly blend more natural parenting type of, concepts into your parenting model successfully. So it's something that you should really, walk into with an open mind, especially with today's guest. We definitely talk about a lot of different things, and it's just a very helpful episode, especially with the inclusion of, finding your tribe in the natural parenting movement, learning more about it, learning more about different practices, gentle disciplining. I mean, these are all things that we can take from it and certainly, adopt it to our lifestyles. Today's guest is Lucy Darnley. She is the wife and mother to 3-year-old Willow and content creator for her blog, earthandbloom.com. She moved to the U.S. from Australia at the beginning of the year after completing her degree in psychological science. She is passionate about natural and evidence-based parenting methods and infant and maternal mental health and well-being. Lucy, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. It's a total pleasure to have you on. And as you know, we reach out to you from Twitter. We really love what you're doing with your blog, and
Thank you.
Would love for you to, just start off by introducing our listeners to what Earth and Bloom is and talk a little bit about your backstory.
Okay, so I'm a blogger at earthandbloom.com, and I started the blog when I moved to the US from Australia. My husband got a position at Vanderbilt University, so we had to pack up and leave. And before I got here, I finished off my degree in psychological science, and I also have a 3-year-old daughter called Willow. So we moved all of us over to the US, and I didn't have my work visa, so I was at home 24/7, which is great for Willow. I enjoy being a stay-at-home mum, but I wanted to get across some of the things that I've been thinking about and some of my philosophies on parenting. So the main theme of my blog at the moment is based around, I guess, what you would call natural parenting. It's a very broad term, but I have articles about natural parenting. I have articles about my experience becoming a parent, which was kind of wobbly to start off with. And yeah, so that's kind of what you can expect if you head on over to my website. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's very informative. You talk about a lot of different parenting topics, and it's funny that you mentioned, it started off being a little wobbly, like, because I think that's how it is. Like, you can prepare all you want, but once like you get thrown into parenthood, then it's like, okay, now it's on. Now it's real. Like, now there's so much that could happen that you didn't read about in a book. So it's very interesting, and it's refreshing to see other viewpoints on parenting, to kind of see what works best for you. So a lot of your blog, like you said, was about natural parenting. So can you kind of tell us a little bit about like the fundamentals of natural parenting and talk a little bit about the science of it?
Yeah, sure. So natural parenting, as I described on my blog, is kind of like an umbrella term for a couple of different parenting movements. So you've got like the gentle parenting movement, attachment parenting, and conscious parenting. And the way that I approach it is the way that I was introduced to it, which is like very non-judgmental, very accepting, and it's more about finding what's natural for you. And basically the fundamentals are to parent consciously and to parent instinctively, and to meet our children and our babies' needs as nature intended. And that's kind of what I think is important to talk about, because the way that nature intended us to parent and to meet our children's needs is not necessarily how it's being done in conventional parenting and mainstream these days, because we've evolved so much, in the past 100 years with the Industrial Revolution, and our education system has evolved so much that we've kind of like moved so far from what's natural, but like evolutionarily we haven't really caught up yet. So I think that it's important to get that dialogue out there and to think about it and to be conscious of how we're doing things and how it's related to what we're supposed to be doing naturally. So yeah, like I said, the basic principles are to parent consciously and instinctively. But at the heart of it is the attachment between the parent and children. So the heart of the natural parenting movement is to encourage that attachment. And so the main principles, I guess you could say, these are from the attachment parenting website. And the main principles are to prepare for your pregnancy and birth, to feed with love and respect. So like feeding, whether it's breastfeeding or bottle feeding, you're using that time to encourage the attachment. And then also responding sensitively to your child's needs and that kind of thing. Also using nurturing touch and engaging in nighttime parenting. So that's kind of things like co-sleeping. It's not necessarily co-sleeping. You could be sleeping in separate rooms, but you're still engaging when your child wakes up and is crying through the night. That's an important thing to natural parenting. Providing consistent loving care and practicing gentle and positive discipline. That's an important one. And just finding like a balance between personal and family life. And then also another important aspect of natural parenting as a whole is thinking about our relationship with nature and how we can care for nature and enjoy it, and also maybe engaging in holistic healthcare. But like I said, most importantly, it's doing what feels natural for you.
Right. So it is kind of like almost like an umbrella term for so many other types of niche of parenting. What we see now in today's day and age that, I think we need this movement now more than ever, just because of the stresses in life, whether they be financial, whether they be work-related, family-related. We have so many different pressures from all facets of life that I think it's kind of almost tearing apart that relationship. So I think it's really important that, because especially what you said about nature. I mean, we talk on the podcast a lot about nature deficit disorder. Children are attached to their devices. There's, even parents, like there's no family, like real family time in a lot of homes. Like there's no engagement. Yeah. Even talking maybe more than 5 minutes at a time, asking how your day is. So I think it's really important that the resurgence of natural parenting, the movement has definitely grown, and more people are showing, interest in it. So I think it's really important that these topics are discussed. Now, how would you approach someone? Like, let's say if I said, "Oh, I'm interested in natural parenting," like, what are some things that you would tell them on how they could get started? Maybe some areas to look into so they can start their journey on a more natural parenting type of road.
Okay, so first of all, there's so many things that you can do every day that can sort of like help you to become more involved with the natural parenting movement. And you don't have to do everything. Like, you don't have to be someone who does everything like baby wearing, breastfeeding, like exclusively, co-sleeping. You don't have to do everything.
Right.
It's just making like small changes. And I just want to say it's interesting that you mentioned what you called nature deficit disorder, because as someone who's involved in the sciences, there's so much research coming out now about how there's a lot of intricate psychological and physical things going on with our being out in nature that are actually really imperative to our psychological and physical development. I mean, there's even things coming out, there's even research coming out that children are becoming more short-sighted, and initially we thought that it was because they were staring at the screen too much, and that's actually not the case. What's happening is the sunlight is actually involved in the growth of our eyes. So because children are not being exposed to that natural light, it's actually stunting their eye growth, and they're becoming more short-sighted. So there's just like so many things.
Oh, wow. I had no idea.
Yeah,
I had no idea.
Yeah, it's amazing when you start looking into the relationship with our physical development and being out in nature. So yeah, that was really interesting. But in terms of what I would say to someone who wants to maybe like incorporate more natural parenting into their everyday life. So some things that you can start trying is from pregnancy, like even from before conception or during pregnancy. One really important thing I think is to prepare for your birth. And it doesn't, like people think, oh, natural parenting, you know, you're going to want to have a birth that's a water birth or no Western medicine. And that's not necessarily the case. The most important thing is making yourself informed of your options, because there are so many sort of pain relief options or birthing options that maybe if you're going to like a mainstream doctor, they might not make you aware of.
Right.
So just becoming aware of that. And for my birth, I did a calm birth course, which I think is only Australian. They only have it in Australia,
What's
but
it
I
called?
think calm birth.
Calm birth? Oh, I've never. You know what? I think they have variations of it here, but was it available at the hospital?
It wasn't available through the hospital. It's like a private program that you can sort of go to in addition to the hospital class. But I think it's like very similar to hypnobirthing.
Right, right.
So that just helps you to deal with the whole experience. And sort of, I think the most important thing is to be empowered, because I know that a lot of people are going into the experience feeling disempowered, and that's creating like even post-traumatic stress because they were so disempowered during their experience. So I think that that's really important. And then you get that initial bonding. Like if you can turn that birth experience and the pregnancy experience into something positive, that helps you to decrease your stress levels, and that helps you to get that initial bonding time between you and your baby, which is so important and, you know, at the center of natural parenting. So that's obviously the first thing. And then using that feeding time, if you're still in the early years of your child's life, you can use the feeding time as a time to cultivate attachment. So use that time for bonding. Like make sure that you're holding the baby, make sure that you're looking at them and making eye contact. That's just an easy, simple thing that you can do.
Right. Yeah, you know, just to circle back to what you said before, it's very true, because I get this constantly. I get this all the time. And I have, my oldest daughter is 10 years old and my youngest is 3 years old. And I feel that I'm very much more like a natural, like crunchy, quote unquote, type of parent with my youngest, because, you know, it's kind of like, you know, everyone looks at you and they're like, oh, you co-sleep, you know, cloth diaper, you are, you know, whatever, you follow a certain type of lifestyle, a certain type of diet. But it's all like gradual. Like people they look at like they just take a snapshot of what you are now, but they don't see that like a lot of these different parenting techniques kind of fold into each other. Like you do one and then you kind of like go into baby wearing. You may go into baby wearing and then go into cloth diapering. Like it's kind of almost like a stream that you're swimming down. And I think in today's society, we get so discouraged. We get so like, we beat ourselves up, especially with birth, especially if, let's say, you have a C-section or if you don't have your birthing plan didn't go the way you wanted it to. A lot of people beat themselves up. So I think it's really important to kind of like start at one phase of it. And like you said, which the first one would be the actual pregnancy, you know, and birth part of it. Now, you recommended for feeding, just spending more like bond time, whether you breastfeed or formula feed. Like how would a formula fed mom, for example, how could she, you know, get that same comfort if, let's say, she's self-conscious about doing it or whatever the situation is? Like how could she get that bond time with her baby?
Yeah, so first of all, I just want to address what you said with it being like a snowball effect and things not going to plan. And it's a shame that we do beat ourselves up because I beat myself up a lot. My birth did not go to plan at all. I couldn't breastfeed, so I'm not the type of person that I just did everything automatically and to plan. Like it didn't work like that for me. And my experience is exactly what you said. Like it was a snowball thing, and I just tried to do what I felt was natural and what I felt was best. And I just sort of accidentally became a part of this movement, and it's only been positive for me though. And although I beat myself up a little bit, at the end of the day, like I found more positive out of the movement than anything. So in terms of the feeding, so with bottle feeding, I think the most important thing is to actually physically hold the baby. I know that with bottle feeding, sometimes it's easy to sort of like sit them there and not make the eye contact and everything. But I know that you're probably aware of this, but another science fact that I want to throw out there is that a baby's eyesight is only long enough, is only about 20 or 30 centimeters. I don't know what that is in inches. I do centimeters because I'm from Australia. But basically it's the distance from the breast to the eyes. From the breast to the mother's face is about the distance that a newborn baby can see. So when they're in that position at the breast, they're able to see their mother's face and they're able to see her expression. And if you're looking at the baby and being expressive and talking to them, that's so vital to their development and vital to forming that initial attachment. And you can totally do the same thing with bottle feeding. You just literally have to hold them at the breast like you would do if you were breastfeeding and make that connection with them.
I had no idea. I did not know that. That's very interesting. That makes a lot of sense from like an evolutionary standpoint, though. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and the reason why I asked that is because we're a diaper service, right? Like we're a podcast, but our side business, we're a diaper service. We have a lot of families that use our service, and we always hear like the self-consciousness of certain families saying, oh, well, I really tried a cloth diaper, or I really tried to nurse, because we're dealing with mothers in that range, right? Like they just had babies and they're diapering. So like we always hear that being like a major, like in their opinion, setback for them. So it's all really just about moving forward, right? So like, let's say if you can't breastfeed, then you can bottle feed, but you can be just as intimate with that feeding as you would with breastfeeding. Same thing with cloth diapering, like you don't have to just dive right into using like the most crunchy type of cloth diaper. Like you could go towards something that's a little more modern. Like I feel like just mothers today, we really beat ourselves up. And I think that's why it's important to talk about these issues, because it really does help to say, hey, listen, that didn't happen for me. Like I know for me personally, I had a very hard time after my youngest was born. Breastfeeding was never fun for me. I always had mastitis. Like I feel like everyone doesn't know like the backstory. They just see, oh, she breastfed for 10 years or she cloth diapered 400 years. Like they don't know how hard it was and like where you started, So I think that's really, really good information, that you give with that. So one thing that you talked a little bit about, I wanted to chat on about with your blog, was like Steiner education. Can you talk a little bit about that? You said your daughter just joined the early childhood program.
Yeah, so my mum was a Steiner educator for I think about 10 years or more. So I didn't go to the Steiner school because she didn't become a Steiner educator until I was already in high school. But I definitely grew up around the Steiner philosophy, and I went to all the extracurricular Steiner things going on. And from the moment she started teaching there and we started engaging in conversations about mainstream education, I knew that when I had children, I really wanted to send them there. So my daughter, as I mentioned before, she's 3 now, and I didn't realize, but our local Waldorf school actually has the early childhood education program. So I recently discovered that, and that they take children as young as her age. So we enrolled her, and she had her first couple of weeks, and she loves it. It's amazing. So for those of you who don't know what Steiner education or Waldorf education is, basically it's based off the philosophy of Rudolf Steiner, who was an Austrian philosopher in the early 1900s. I think that's when he published most of his work. And it's based on a philosophy called anthroposophy, which is it's basically the combination of art, science, and religion. Not so much religion in terms of structured religion, but just religion in terms of recognizing individuals as spiritual beings. So the Waldorf school came from his philosophy, but they don't actually teach that philosophy in the classrooms. It's literally just like the backbone to the education. And the main principle of it is nurturing every aspect of a human, including like that spiritual aspect. So in terms of like what they do in the early childhood program, it's so beautiful. Like you walk into a Waldorf classroom and everything's made of natural materials, and the children help their educators cook and prepare lunch, so they get exposed to all these like amazing like vegetables. They get all that education as well, and they help them to prepare their meal every day. They do a lot of handiwork kind of things, like they learn how to sew, and they learn how to, like I said, they learn how to chop vegetables. They do gardening. So it's all based off of, rather than intellectualizing their early education, it's kind of like based off of them being like spiritual kind of beings, and them being in an imaginative and dreamlike state. So they really like cultivate that instead of intellectualizing it.
Mm-hmm. That's that's so interesting. Now, this age, you said your daughter's 3. I actually have a 3-year-old as well. So now this is like the real fun times of toddlerhood into childhood. Now, one of the things you talk about on your blog is gentle discipline. So as we get, our children get a little older. I have 2 older daughters and I have a little one. How can one, like, let's say for me, incorporate like gentle discipline? Can you talk with our listeners a little bit about that and what exactly it is and what it entails?
Yeah, sure. So, before I go into detail of how you can do gentle discipline, I just want to say that I wasn't raised with gentle discipline. My mom did spank me, and when I first, like before I even fell pregnant, I thought that that's how you did things. I didn't think it was bad. And then I'm not saying that it is bad. If anyone, you know what I mean? I don't want to come across judgmental.
My mom's Italian. I was not raised with gentle discipline. I'm curious how it is.
And neither was my husband. His mom's from the Philippines, and in the Philippines, when she was raised, it was corporal punishment, and that's what my husband was raised with.
Yes.
So, we were raised differently. And it wasn't until I actually started my developmental psychology courses at uni that I learned that there's actually research out there that suggests that maybe spanking isn't the best way to reinforce behavior, and actually, there's research that shows that children that have been brought up, it's detrimental to like mental health, and it can make them more stressed and that kind of thing. And then I thought, okay, like maybe it's not the way to go. And then when I did fall pregnant and I was faced with, thinking about how I was going to discipline her, even initially when I first had her, we still didn't think about gentle discipline. And I started to do more of my own research, and I realized that, this is probably the best way to go for us. And so, but basically, people get it confused, and gentle discipline is not about being like permissive. It's not about letting your kid like do whatever.
Yeah.
It's actually about being really firm and really consistent and really enforcing boundaries. And boundaries are just so important for children's development, because if you don't have those boundaries in place, they can feel anxious. They don't know what to do. They actually thrive off having those reinforced boundaries. And I think like the main underlying factor to gentle discipline is being sensitive. And if your child is, I suppose, acting up or behaving in a way that you don't like, you should first try and understand why they're behaving like that. Like, for instance, I know like 3-year-olds, they can't communicate very well. Maybe they're feeling hungry or tired, and like try and address that first. And then the second step is to be understanding and maybe try and talk to them. Even before my daughter could talk, I would try and like let her know that I understood how she was feeling, and try and let her communicate to me how she's feeling. And even though at first she was just like a 2-year-old who couldn't communicate back, now that she's 3 and she can talk, it's actually paid off, because she will tell me like, you know, how she's feeling, and and she has like this emotional control now. So I think that really actually helps. Like, it surprised me that it helps, but it does help. So try to be understanding and sensitive, and then give them a chance to correct their behavior. I think that's important as well. So say, you know, I understand why you did that behavior, and I understand how you're feeling, but, you know, that behavior was not acceptable, and, you know, give them a chance to correct it. And then, you know, one thing that I do that maybe not everyone in the natural parenting movement agrees with is that I use timeout. So if the behavior continues, I will say, okay, you know, if you do that again, I'm going to put you in timeout. And if she does it again, I will just put her in timeout and let her try and calm down, but only for like 1 minute or 2 minutes. And then you just return, and then you say, you know, why did I put you in here? And they'll explain to you why, and then you reiterate that, and then, and then move on from there. And just all the while trying to be sensitive and understanding.
Oh, okay. You know, that's very interesting. And just to circle back what you said your husband had like corporal punishment. For me, you know, it was the culture. My mother's from Italy, so it was kind of, you know, it was just kind of their way of doing things. And I always said when I got older, I was like, when I have kids, I'm not going to spank my kids, and I never did. And one issue that I ran into was being too much of like a pushover, kind of, when my little ones were young. It's a real thing. So we became more firm. My husband's definitely more firm. I was more, you know, it kind of evened out nicely, but everyone always said how well behaved they were. And I always use the verbiage of saying things are inappropriate, or, you know, that's not the way we conduct ourselves. And like you said, giving them a chance to correct their mistakes. I also use like a chill time. I don't call it time out, but it's more of like, go hang out in your room for a couple minutes, you know, and we also have them write, paint, like do something that's going to get your energy out in a positive light, so we can, you know, revisit this conversation with a different mind frame. And it's something that I need to learn how to do with my little one, because, you know, from my experience with having, you know, like a very traumatizing birth and dealing with postpartum anxiety, I definitely was even more so lax with her. So now, you know, I'm trying to implement that as well. So when people hear of like gentle disciplining, they think of just out of control kids and don't realize that you can have like a well-structured and well-mannered child.
Yeah, and that's a shame, because like I said, there's so much research that gentle discipline really is beneficial and does work.
So can you give our listeners some takeaways today? Just a little bit about natural parenting as a whole, maybe just some things to take away from so they have a better understanding of it?
Sure. So in terms of takeaways, my like one piece of advice would be to like, just don't beat yourself up about it. Like what we were talking about before, just take things as they come and just try and do what feels best and most natural for you. And I wish that like when I became a mom, I wish that people made me aware that you can do natural parenting and like mainstream parenting at the same time. So I wish someone said to me, because like I said, I had trouble breastfeeding. I wish someone said to me, you know, that you can like mix feed, like that's okay. Or, you know, you can baby wear sometimes and not other times. Like, you know what I mean? It's all about finding a balance. And I wish more people promoted that balance, because I feel like the way that the movement is now, there's a lot of people who are all or nothing. And the one thing that I want to get across is that it doesn't have to be like that. You can take some things from it and use it to benefit your life and your relationship with your family. And that's okay. Like, just do what is natural for you.
Absolutely. That's actually a really good point, because you do see that a lot. You see, you know, diehards, all or nothing, which I respect, because I think if you can commit to every element of that, I think it's fantastic. But also, if you can't, or even if you don't want to, doesn't make you any less of a natural parent. So exactly. That's a very, very good point.
Thank you. Yeah. Even with diapering, even if you do like, you know, disposables when you're out, and then you do cloth diapering when you're home, like, you know, doesn't have to be all or nothing.
Yeah, we tell people that all the time. We get people that call us with the service. Oh, we want to do this, but our babysitter, or, you know, my husband, or the nanny, you know, they give all these reasons, and we're like, listen, it doesn't mean that you're not getting cloth diaper points. You know what I mean? Like, you still got those points, even if you put one on. At least you tried, you know? Like, and again, I think it's great, like, you know, especially being a parent today, it's so stressful. You know, we have a lot of, you know, even if let's say you don't have the support system, you know, you're doing it by yourself, or even when you have a whole family, it's just a lot of times, it's just a lot of stresses, a lot of other people's opinions, and it really sways what we really feel and what we really want to do. So just follow your intuition and move it forward. Now, can you talk a little bit about your blog and where our listeners can find you?
Yeah, sure. So the blog is www.earthandbloom.com. It's Earth and A-N-D. You can also find me on Facebook. Just search for Earth and Bloom. And you can find me on Twitter, which is my handle is Lucy Darnley, LucyDarnley. And then you can find me on Instagram too, which is Lucy_Earth and Bloom. And yeah, I'm posting content regularly. And a lot of the things that I discussed in the podcast today, such as like the science behind natural parenting, you can actually, I've got huge blogs where I've got like a bunch of research and links to the research and that kind of thing that you can go and have a look if you're interested. And I've also got posts about how you can implement natural parenting every day. I've got stuff on mindfulness meditation, like alternative healthcare, just all sorts of stuff related, and some lifestyle things as well. So yeah, if you're interested in that, please go check it out and have a read.
Absolutely. And like I said earlier, I mean, I started following you from Twitter, and your blog's different because, it's great to see other people's insights, but when you have like the scientific backing and the research, and it's a very thorough, thought out blog, and I absolutely love what you're doing. I do think you're going to be big in the blogging community, and keep doing what you're doing. I'm a big fan of yours.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Well, thank you so much, Lucy, for coming on again, and I look forward to having you on at some other time.
Oh, no worries. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
That wraps up our interview with Lucy Darnley of earthandbloom.com. Please do check out her website. She has a fantastic blog with a lot of really good, rich content, especially on natural parenting, and also articles that are definitely heavily, evidence-based and really would sway even the most conventional type of parent. You can also check her out on her social media handles at Lucy_earthandbloom on Instagram, her website, www.earthandbloom.com, and on her Twitter at Darnley Lucy. Thank you so much, Lucy, for coming on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure. Well, you guys, that wraps up another episode of the Nature's Premier podcast. Thank you all so much again for tuning into another episode. Please do remember to rate and subscribe to the podcast. It really does help get our episodes up in front of those families who can use this information. Even if they don't have children or if they're not looking to have children, we talk about a lot of other things, with the environment, with how to reduce your eco footprint. And then with families, we talk about natural parenting. We talk about different ways to live a more naturally minded lifestyle. So it's super helpful when you do rate and subscribe. And of course, we always appreciate it. If you are interested in collabing on a future episode of the podcast, please feel free to email us at podcast@naturespremiere.com. We absolutely love hearing from our listeners. Thank you all so much again for tuning in to another episode, and until next week, we hope you have a wonderful, stress-free week ahead. Take care, friends.